President Trump was asked if there were extremists on both the left and the right. He was actually asked this by Fox and Friends, and his exact words were, "I'll tell you something that's going to get me in trouble, but I couldn't care less. The radicals on the right oftentimes are radical because they don't want to see crime. The radicals on the left are the problem, and they're vicious, and they're horrible, and they're politically savvy." Do you agree with the president?
I don't speak for the president. The president speaks for himself.
Do you agree with the president?
I don't. On what matter?
On the question that I just asked, do you agree with his statement about the radical left?
That there's ideology that's driving violence on both sides? Yes, that's what he acknowledged.
No, he didn't. He didn't. But I'm glad that you're saying that and actually creating some separation between you and the president. And I'm glad that you are acknowledging that there is violent extremism on both sides.
This may look like a heated exchange over extremist violence, but it's actually a stress test for institutional independence. What's really being tested here is whether federal law enforcement can follow evidence when political power demands a different story. This raises broader questions about how democracies protect public trust when data and ideology collide. In this video, we'll break down how one congressional confrontation exposes the fragile line between accountability and political influence inside America's justice system.
Lady from California is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Director, for coming here today. And actually, thank you for your response to my colleague from New York who asked you earlier about violent extremism. And you said that there is violent extreme ideology on both sides. And I think you actually alluded to that same statement yesterday in the Senate. So I too have some questions I'd like to ask you. These are not gotcha questions, and just deny, please, what you deem to be false. So Dylan Roof, who followed white supremacist propaganda, murdered 9 black parishioners in Charleston in 2015. Do you deny this?
I'm sorry. Dylan Roof?
Roof?
Roof? Can you give me some more information?
You're head of the FBI. You probably know this. If you don't know, that's fine.
You can give me a reminder. I've got a lot in front of me.
It was national news. Robert Bowers murdered 11 Jewish worshipers in Pittsburgh in 2018.
I do remember that.
And it was the deadliest anti-Semitic attack. So do you admit that that happened?
I'm not saying the other thing didn't happen. I'm just asking for a little information.
Patrick Cruces, who posted a manifesto about a Hispanic invasion, walked into a Walmart in El Paso, Texas in 2019 and began firing. He murdered 23 people that day, and the youngest was 15. Do you admit or deny that that happened?
I'll take your presentation as accurate.
All right, well, I have to say all of these cases have been adjudicated. As I said, they are not gotcha questions. These incidents were national news. And as director of the FBI, you have access to all of this information. So in 2022, Peyton Grendon walked into a supermarket in a black neighborhood in Buffalo, New York, and started shooting. He murdered 10 people that day. And on September 10th, your friend Charlie Kirk was assassinated. Tyler Robinson has been taken into custody and charged, but also on that day, Desmond Holley, a 16-year-old white male, shot and injured 2 students at a high school in Colorado before killing himself. And according to the Anti-Defamation League, he had a fascination with mass shootings and white supremacy. So do you admit to, deny these facts?
Those happened.
Okay. Your predecessor, former FBI Director Christopher Wray, said that one of the most dangerous concerns is that racially motivated violent extremism, especially white supremacists, has been the biggest chunk of our domestic terrorism cases and is responsible for the most lethal attacks over the last decade. Do you admit or deny, A, that he said this?
I'll let the record reflect that. Whatever he said was what he said.
All right, and do you agree?
That there is racially motivated crimes being committed in America, yes.
Yes, especially white supremacists, which is the biggest chunk of our domestic terrorism. I'm glad that you said this. So last week, President Trump was asked if there were extremists on both the left and the right. He was actually asked this by Fox and Friends, and his exact words were, "I'll tell you something that's going to get me in trouble, but I couldn't care less. The radicals on the right oftentimes are radical because they don't want to see crime. The radicals on the left are the problem, and they're vicious, and they're horrible, and they're politically savvy." Do you agree with the president?
I don't speak for the president. The president speaks for himself.
Do you agree with the president?
I don't. On what matter?
On the question that I just asked, do you agree with his statement about the radical left?
That there's ideology that's driving violence on both sides? Yes, that's what he acknowledged.
No, he didn't. He didn't. But I'm glad that you're saying that and actually creating some separation between you and the president. And I'm glad that you are acknowledging that there is violent extremism on both sides. What's interesting is that the research arm of the Department of Justice, the National Institute of Justice, do you know what that is?
I'm familiar with them.
Okay, great. It is the research arm of the Department of Justice, and it published an article in 2024 devoted to domestic radicalization, violent extremism, and terrorism. I have it. It's interesting that it's no longer on the website. It has been scrubbed, but I ask these questions because what makes a strong, qualified director of any business, of any household, of the FBI, what makes a reputable prosecutor is not lapdog loyalty, but a commitment to the creed that evidence is agnostic and that the evidence will lead you to making the right decisions. And your job, no one's job is to like the data or the evidence, it is to collect it. That is how you gain trust. And Mr. Chair, I would like to enter into the record, if I may. White supremacist group stands by racist ideology with unanimous consent.
Without objection.
Dylan Roof, the radicalization of the alt-right and ritualized racial violence.
Without objection.
Thank you. Another article, how Robert Bowers went from conservative to white nationalist. I'd like to enter that into the record with me.
Without objection.
Patrick Cruces believed he was fulfilling Trump's wishes in El Paso attack, his attorney said. I'd like to enter into the record.
Without objection.
Buffalo shooting, how far-right killers are radicalized online. I'd like to enter that into the record.
Without objection.
Evergreen High School shooters' online activity reveals fascination with mass shootings, white supremacy. I'd like to enter that into the record.
Without objection.
Murder and extremism in the United States in 2024, a report by the Anti-Defamation League. I'd like to enter that into
Without
the record.
objection.
And the article, the report that was scrubbed from the DOJ just recently, National Institute of Justice Journal focusing on domestic radicalization, violent extremism, and terrorism. I'd like to enter that into the record.
Without objection.
And lastly, the libertarian think tank Cato and their analysis on violent extremism and the right rising in extremist acts. I'd like to enter that into the record.
Without objection.
Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back.
What unfolded in that final exchange was not just a clash of names and dates, but a revealing moment about how power reacts when confronted with uncomfortable evidence. Representative Kamlager-Dove pressed Director Patel with a simple, almost clinical demand: acknowledge the public record. She cited incidents that had once dominated headlines, moments that had forced the nation to confront the darkest corners of political radicalization. And yet, as she spoke, the director hesitated, asked for reminders, and tried to move past what had already been etched into the country's collective memory. That hesitation, that subtle resistance to plainly naming what had happened, became the center of gravity of the hearing. In those few minutes, the room shifted. The Congresswoman was not playing for theater. She was constructing a factual record. Each question was designed to test whether the nation's top investigative authority would stand firmly on documented reality or retreat into vague generalities. Patel eventually conceded that these events had occurred, but the way he did it, cautiously, reluctantly, almost defensively, revealed something deeper than any single answer. It exposed the tension between evidence and loyalty, between data and political pressure. This is the quiet drama that defines so many moments in modern Washington. It is not always about shouting or spectacle. Sometimes it is about whether someone entrusted with immense responsibility will say out loud and without flinching that the facts are what they are, even when those facts make powerful people uncomfortable. Kamlager-Dove framed it plainly. Leadership is not about liking the data. It is about following it. In that simple statement lies a philosophy that cuts to the core of democratic governance. Institutions only retain credibility when they are anchored to reality rather than to ideology. The exchange also revealed something else. Patel repeatedly emphasized that extreme beliefs exist on both sides, a phrase that has become a familiar shield in political discourse. On its surface, it sounds balanced, even reasonable. But Kamlager-Dove was not asking for slogans. She was asking whether the director would recognize a pattern that federal agencies themselves have documented for years. That certain ideologically driven networks have been responsible for the majority of the most devastating domestic incidents. When she referenced previous FBI leadership and the Department of Justice's own research, she was not offering opinion. She was pointing to the institution's own conclusions. That is why the moment mattered. A government agency cannot combat what it refuses to clearly define. When leaders blur distinctions for political comfort, the mission itself becomes compromised. The Congresswoman's insistence on entering reports into the official record, studies from the Justice Department, analyses from civil rights organizations, and findings from policy institutes was more than procedural. It was a reminder that the truth does not disappear just because it becomes inconvenient. Even when online archives are altered or quietly removed, evidence has a way of resurfacing, demanding to be acknowledged. In this hearing, the stakes were not abstract. They were about public trust. Patel holds a position that commands enormous authority, one that shapes how resources are deployed and how threats are assessed. When asked whether he agreed with a statement from the president that seemed to minimize certain dangers while amplifying others, he chose to sidestep. "The president speaks for himself," he said. It was a careful answer, designed to avoid conflict. But leadership is often defined by what someone is willing to say when neutrality itself becomes a form of avoidance. Kamlager-Dove, for her part, was drawing a line between loyalty and duty. She argued that credibility is earned not through alignment with any political figure, but through a commitment to evidence. That principle is as old as the justice system itself. Investigators, prosecutors, and judges are meant to be servants of the record, not of a party or a personality. When that principle erodes, the entire structure begins to wobble. This is why the hearing resonated far beyond the walls of Congress. It was a microcosm of a larger struggle playing out across the country. Whether institutions will remain grounded in verifiable reality or drift toward a version of truth shaped by political convenience. The reports Kamlager-Dove placed into the record were not mere paperwork. They were a statement that the nation's own research, its own analysts, and its own history tell a consistent story about where the most serious domestic dangers have emerged. Ignoring that story does not make the nation safer. It makes it blind. And blindness is not neutral. It carries consequences. When agencies downplay or mischaracterize threats, communities lose confidence, and extremists find room to grow. The Congresswoman's closing words about trust were not rhetorical flourishes. They were a warning. Trust is built when leaders show that they are willing to confront reality, even when reality is politically inconvenient. It is destroyed when they equivocate. In that quiet, procedural ending, the chair granting permission to enter documents into the record, the gavel moving the hearing forward, there was a powerful symbolism. The record, once entered, cannot be wished away. It becomes part of the institutional memory of the nation. And that memory is what future investigators, lawmakers, and citizens will look back on when they ask whether those in power chose courage or comfort. This is the story that matters. Not just who said what, but what those words revealed about the health of our democratic institutions. Kamlager-Dove was not simply grilling a witness. She was defending the idea that evidence should guide policy, that facts should anchor authority, and that no leader is above the obligation to speak truthfully about the challenges the nation faces. As viewers, we are not passive observers in this process. The strength of a republic depends on an informed public that demands accountability. When officials are called before Congress, it is not just a formality. It is one of the few moments when power must answer to the people's representatives. What we saw here was a test of that accountability. And like so many tests in recent years, it revealed both the fragility and the resilience of our system. The fragility lies in how easily facts can be dodged. The resilience lies in how stubbornly they return. In the end, this was not about one director or one lawmaker. It was about whether the machinery of justice will continue to be driven by evidence or by expedience. That choice will shape how the nation confronts its most serious internal challenges in the years ahead. So remember this moment. Remember how a single voice insisted that the record be honored, that research be respected, and that reality not be brushed aside. That insistence is the heartbeat of a functioning democracy. If you believe in that principle, if you believe that truth still matters in a world of spin and denial, then stay with us. Subscribe to Liberty Report USA. Support our work to keep the record clear, the questions sharp, and the light on those who wield power in the name of the American people.